how deeply fortunate we are, here in this room, in this lifetime, to be in the presence of one of the greatest world leaders of our time, His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama.
Political questions about the evolution of things, ICT, where it came from, and about inside of Tibet, so that people understand what's happening there. Okay.
Your Holiness, we are profoundly grateful to your leadership, your wisdom, your compassion, and for your vision of a world in which conflict is resolved through dialogue, where religious harmony replaces religious strife, and where the oneness of humanity is respected. It is needed more than ever in a world driven by conflict and tyranny. Our nonviolent path is not a passive process. It requires courage. Your Holiness, it requires us to follow your example. At the International Campaign for Tibet, this is our guiding light. RCT was founded to fulfill your vision, and this year we commemorate 30th anniversary for serving Tibetan people and your Holiness. The RCT community, now worldwide over 100,000 strong, connects caring individuals who act for Tibet and peace and justice across the world. Starting from Washington with one office in 1988, under your inspiration and your guidance, Your Holiness, today we have offices in Amsterdam, Berlin, Brussels, and staff in London and in Dharamsala. As the largest Tibet support group, we are working to keep the Tibet issue alive on the world stage to support Your Holiness's efforts for a negotiated solution for Tibetan people. We are active at the United Nations, directly challenging China's attempts to block support for Tibet. We work in Tibet, we work in the European Union, which you have always admired as a symbol of peace and unity. We work at the highest levels, from the White House to foreign ministries across Europe. We engage our supporters, ensuring the voices of Tibetan people inside are heard. RCT campaigned for the release of political prisoners, knowing the importance of solidarity and compassion for those who can feel most isolated. We have helped to secure humanitarian assistance for refugees and development programs for Tibetans inside and outside Tibet. We work with the younger generation of Tibetans, training and mentoring the future leaders of Tibet. We brief journalists worldwide, and our reports and research have helped to shine a spotlight on the appalling situation inside Tibet. In Tibet, China has instituted increasingly hardline policies that undermine Tibetan culture and religion. There's a deep climate of fear, with even very young children being indoctrinated in Chinese Communist Party propaganda. Since 2009, more than 140 Tibetans have set fire to themselves, an act emerging from the anguish of oppression. But even so, during all these years, the Tibetan people's spirit is not crushed. In particular, the young generation is continuing the challenge to the misguided policies of the Chinese government. We at International Campaign for Tibet are determined to meet the new challenges we face in serving Tibetan people and Your Holiness. We must find new ways to tell Tibet's story. A concerted effort inside and outside Tibet is needed now for a lasting solution for Tibet. We must build stronger international support for Tibet with like-minded countries across the world, with institutions, but also with individuals, working all together towards this common goal. Let us rejoice in Your Holiness's presence and rededicate ourselves, knowing, as the Indian political leader Jayaprakash Nayan said many years ago, I quote, "Is Tibet lost forever? No, 1,000 times no. Tibet will not die, because there is no death for the human spirit." Finally, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of International Campaign for Tibet to wish Your Holiness a long life, and may all your aspirations be fulfilled. Thank you. Thank you. Dear friends, now I have the privilege and honor to invite His Holiness Dalai Lama and Richard Gere, Chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, to start a 25-minute conversation. His Holiness and Richard know each other very well and have developed over the past decades a very special friendship relationship. They meet as often as they can, whether in the United States, here in Europe, or in India, where Richard attends His Holiness talks and teachings. Despite their different lives and backgrounds, both of them share a lot of common values and ideas and have very complementary understanding of the world. I'm sure that you will notice this very strong intellectual and human connections between them. Richard does not need a long introduction, as I'm sure you know his incredible commitment to support Tibetan people for many decades. As a Buddhist and a close friend of His Holiness, Richard has played a very unique role to promote peace, justice, dialogue, to resolve the issue of Tibet, which unfortunately very far from being resolved. For me as a Tibetan, it has always been an honor and inspiring to see his life commitment have chosen on the side of truth and justice. And I hope that you will also feel inspired and enjoy their conversation as we at the International Campaign for Tibet, we do every time we listen to them. Thank you, Your Holiness.
I guess I'm running with it. Does it sound okay? Can you hear me? First of all, welcome everyone. I mean, this is an extraordinary group here. I really had no idea how many people would be here and what extraordinary energy was here. And
I think one factor, today, Sunday,
even
so no work.
nobody.
I think they sacrifice sleep. Okay.
We try to make these later in the day, but it costs more later in the day, so we have to do them in the morning. You know, whenever I see a group like this, I'm always there's a poem by a Japanese poet, Kobayashi Isa, a very simple poem that under cherry trees, there are no strangers. And I always have that feeling around His Holiness, is that He is our great cherry tree, and that sometimes 500,000 people, strangers, in normal life come to see His Holiness. But under the cherry tree of His Holiness, we all become friends very quickly. He has that unique ability to find that common denominator of life force, joy, love that animates us. And I've never failed to see that happen anywhere in the world, whether it's been in India, of course, where literally 500,000 people will show up in Bodh Gaya or Siliguri or Ladakh or wherever, and immediately we're all in a very small, close family friendship. Or if it's in America or Europe, South America, and Mexico, I've seen incredible things there with His Holiness. I'm here today as the chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, so I think the talk we'll have this morning, which will be about 25 minutes, will focus on the situation and has it's evolved since the 50s and the present. And I'd love to have His Holiness share with us his view of how the situation has evolved, how it's changed, and eventually the situation as it is now in China and also in Tibet, and how it relates to that dynamic as well as the international dynamic. I think if we have time, I'd like to get into also His Holiness's feelings about this rather crude form of nationalism which we're seeing evolve around the world now. It's very unpleasant and crude nationalism, tribalism. So we'll see how far we get in this talk. We have about 25 minutes. So, Your Holiness, just to start with the evolution of the International Campaign for Tibet, this, to the best of my knowledge, it came from three people originally: Lodi Gere Rinpoche, and Van Walt was in that first group too, and Michel Bohana came to you with an idea, probably in around 1988. And from my own side, we had just started, Bob Thurman and I had just started Tibet House, and I was becoming much more politicized at that time. But do you remember what your vision was, or your hopes and dreams for ICT and the international political movement to help the Tibetan people?
Of course, very important, because I think as far as 6 million Tibetan people's determination is concerned, very strong. But we need support from outside world. So therefore, this organization, I think right from the beginning, very, very active. Firstly, I think, I feel it is very important, Tibetan struggle, not just political. I think now more and more people, including many scientists, realize the knowledge which we kept over 1,000 years, originally come from India. This knowledge, sometimes I describing those knowledge which originally come from India, mainly in Nalanda tradition, over 1,000 years, we kept. Now today, these traditions available only in Tibetan tradition. So that, besides sort of Buddhist practice or Buddhist thing, but psychology and philosophy, like quantum physics, and then logical approach. These things I consider, I think, the treasure of world, I think. So therefore, Tibetan issue very much related with that. If Tibetan issue is just political, then I will not already now, I think some of them may know, 2001, I retired from political responsibility. All political sort of matter was carried by elected political leadership. So I retired. But as far as the responsibility for preservation of Tibetan Buddhist culture, this ancient Nalanda tradition, I really feel something really worthwhile to preserve. And there is real potential to share more human beings. So I think my very concept, the sense of responsibility or global responsibility, is actually come from, you see, the Buddhist tradition. Mm-hmm. We always say entire sentient being as a mother sentient being. So this organization, as ICT, very, very helpful. You see, make clear about Tibetan issue. So it is very, very useful. Thank you, and including you yourself. Right from the beginning, you really, I think, fully involved by yourself. So I really appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I remember being in Bodh Gaya in '86, I think it was. His Holiness, I met him in Dharamsala in 1982, and I had been a student of Zen at that time, Japanese Buddhism, and it completely captured me, and I had a daily Buddhist practice, which was a wonderful thing to establish. But when I met His Holiness and the Tibetan community in Dharamsala, my life radically changed, obviously. And I saw the fullness of the possibilities of taking the teachings of the Buddha very seriously in the 360 degrees of what his teaching was, and that the ability to completely transform one's mind and one's life we were capable of that kind of incredible and complete transformation. So it certainly set me on a path. But when we met, I remember very clearly in 1986, and I was on my way leaving Bodh Gaya, and I was brought to your rooms, and you said to me at that point, you know, we need a lot of help, us Tibetans, and we need to rely on our friendships in the rest of the world. And I think it was in those years where you realized that the Tibetan dilemma, the paradigm, had to be internationalized to really help the people inside of Tibet, that it couldn't be kept as a small dialogue within Asia, that it had to be internationalized. And that really was the root of the impulse to create International Campaign for Tibet, which Siring Jampa has just said, we have offices all over the world now, and I think are doing extraordinary work. Your Holiness, could you talk to us? There's so little that we know about what's going on inside of Tibet and the lives of Tibetans inside of Tibet and how that has evolved. When you left in 1959, obviously there was chaos. No one knew exactly what was going to happen at that point. And could you describe a little bit about your thinking as you left Tibet in 1959 and went into exile in India, what you saw as the future of Tibetans in exile, but also the ones who had to remain inside of Tibet?
Last 60 years, it's a situation sometimes very serious, and including torture, killing, very, very serious, but sometimes a little bit comparatively more lenient. For example, during Cultural Revolution, or just before Cultural Revolution, around 56, the open revolt started from eastern Tibet, Kham, Lizang. Then that, also the crisis spread Amdo area, northeast Tibet, 1958. So a lot of people killed. Many people, arrest. So I think early 80, my there was a direct contact with Chinese government. As a result, you see, we have the opportunity to send some fact-finding mission. So after they returned, they told me some of their own village, the male choga, male population, much reduced because of killing, fighting. So very sad, but then after Cultural Revolution, particularly when Hu Yanpang became party secretary, then things really much change. So then after Hu Yanpang, in China proper, eventually Tiananmen event happened. So then their policy become more hardliner. So in Tibetan area also, then some of these hardliner, they are very short-sighted, narrow-minded. So they, in their eye, separate Tibetan identity, including language and religious Buddhist knowledge, they consider source of threat of separation. So accordingly, they really carry systematic policy. In many areas, they restriction study Tibetan. And then these bigger monastery, you see, they start political education. So very difficult. But then, more suppressive policy, Tibetan become more harder, including younger generation. So then, during Jiang Zemin president, then we developed some direct contact. And comparatively, things a little better. So like that, sometimes, say, Kasota, much difficult, sometimes a little bit better. But economy is concerned. Now, in many Tibetan area, new buildings, new house, and also I think economy facility, I think improve. That's also good. Now my main concern is the environment issue. My Chinese friend, ecologist, he wrote article, mentioned the global warming from effect from Tibetan plateau to global warming as much as South Pole and the North Pole. So he described Tibetan plateau is third pole. So we really need special sort of care about environment. And then some Indian ecologists, they say Tibet high altitude and dry climate once damage the ecology, it takes longer for revival, recovery by nature. Therefore, it is very important to take special care. I usually say, telling my Indian friend, we are supplier of water to millions of Indians, whole northern India, and also China also, like Yellow River, and then Mekong River, also through Vietnam. And then some river which go to India. All these, ultimate source is Tibet. So taking care. Now already there are signs the snowfall reduce. And even Dharamsala, 1960, summer I come to Dharamsala as the government of India arranged. That winter, lot of snowfall. Then each year, less. Now these days, during winter, snowfall in my place was very less, except in high mountains. So there's clear sign of global warming.
You should know that Dharamsala in the winter is one of the coldest places on the planet. And also the rainfall. The precipitation in Dharamsala is off the scale, but it has radically changed in the last 10 years, 15 years.
Right. So after I retirement from political responsibility, but I fully committed regarding Tibetan ecology, environment issue. And then most important is preservation of Tibetan knowledge, as I mentioned earlier. Something I really feel very useful.
But this is something
I have
Your
no
Holiness,
modern education, nothing. But when we meet scientists and many scholars, the ancient knowledge which come from India, I study from childhood. When I studied, I was very, very lazy student. I have no interest in these subjects. But gradually I realized, the knowledge which I learned from childhood, really, really useful. So my translator, he ex-monk, so he also find this very useful. This knowledge they learn in big monastic institution. So I really fully committed to preservation of this knowledge. Now, fortunately, now China become, I think, the biggest number of Buddhist population, around 400 million Buddhists. And many of these Buddhists really showing genuine respect and genuine interest about Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which they realize pure tradition, authentic tradition of Nalanda. So some Chinese scholar, they describe Tibetan Nalanda tradition, Buddhism really showing genuine respect and genuine interest about Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which they realize pure tradition, authentic tradition of Nalanda. So some Chinese scholar, they describe Tibetan Nalanda tradition, Buddhism is very scientific sort of religion.
you want to explain a little to this group, Nalanda, what that tradition
I
is?
think you explain better.
Well, His Holiness has been talking about Nalanda for many decades now as really the source of Buddhism, and that's where all the great scholars were. It was the greatest university of its time, 8th century, 9th century, 10th century. The greatest minds of Asia came to Nalanda to study, and it was a vast university, walled city university. And one of the interesting things about it, it had gates at the cardinal points, and they put their best debaters, their greatest minds in each of those gates, and you had to win a debate with one of those debaters, those great minds, to be allowed admission into Nalanda. And really an extraordinary, visionary place of learning, of excellence on all levels. But that's the tradition that His Holiness really speaks about and he teaches.
So, like Nagarjuna and Arya Sangha and so on, these great masters, they are writing, we still use as a textbook, we study. Firstly, these root texts learned by heart, memorize. Then each word explained by teacher, according commentary mainly wrote by Indian Nalanda masters. Then also the Tibetan master. I think that book which translated from India, mainly Sanskrit, then Pali, altogether about 300 volumes. Sometimes I usually is telling people when I give some sort of lecture on Tibetan, we should not consider these 300 books something sacred book and
not only as an object of worship.
These are the texts. We should study these books. So these among the about 225 or something volume wrote by Nalanda masters. Really excellent. So in Tibet tradition, is some monastery, not much study. They carry some rituals. I openly telling them, these are outdated. If you simply carry ritual like that, that unfortunately become keeping blind faith. No. Now reasoning, debate, very important. So about now more than I think 40 years, I appeal all Tibetan monasteries should start, even those who say traditionally not studying these books, should start study. So most of them listen that. And then nunneries, nuns also, they should study equal way. So now 2 years ago, about 20 nuns, Kishima.
That's the highest academic degree in the Tibetan tradition.
Then now really one good news, the whole Himalayan, the Buddhist population, they set up one committee. Their goal is try to each monastery in Himalayan range should be learning center. Wonderful, wonderful. So therefore, now these things, whether you are believer or non-believer, or believe different religion, okay, that's personal matter. But as far as knowledge, psychology, and like quantum physics, now these just knowledge. Now these days I'm telling, you see, people, in our modern education, the education about hygiene of physical there now should include hygiene of emotion. That's very important. I think we world are passing through some kind of crisis of emotion. That basically we human beings, according to scientists, compassionate. Human nature, more compassionate. Logically, we are social animal. We all received maximum affection, love from our mother. Without that, we can't survive. And then constant anger, fear, eating our immune system. Whereas, you see, keep more warm-heartedness, very useful for our health. So these are the reasons basic human nature is more compassionate. Therefore, if now the problem is existing our education, so-called modern education, only oriented about material value, not pay, I think, at all attention about our inner value. So the Tibetan issue, from that aspect, I feel very important.
Well, absolutely. We're all beneficiaries of the Tibetan diaspora in many ways. The tragedy that has befallen Tibetans in Tibet has forced these extraordinary beings into the rest of the world and have brought their ideas to us. And the ideas that are coming into education, for sure. I know there's pilot programs around the world that are using a lot of Tibetan techniques of emotional transformation and working with the mind. But also in the realm of science and physics. And Your Holiness, would you speak to that? Some of how this has evolved, this dialogue between you and science, Western science, and how, I mean, I've been part of this also, and obviously Thupten Jinpa is the chairman of Mind and Life. The two of you have seen this evolution of Eastern practices, Eastern science, Eastern exploration, and how it's interacting with Western ideas and approach to the ideas of consciousness, reality, emotions, etc. Speak to that a little bit about how that's evolved and where we are now.
I think you should speak. I think you participate. Mention you. You should
let me set the stage for this, because this started, Mind and Life started in 1982, was it?
First dialogue was 87, yeah.
It was about that. And it was these dialogues and interactions that take place in Dharamsala at His Holiness's residence. And it started as maybe 4, 5, 6 days of talks with world-class scientists in different areas of behavioral sciences, physics, etc. And it was essentially for His Holiness to interact with these ideas at a high level. But they would always evolve into something more than anyone ever realized, as these ideas would clash initially, but then they would find a way to get larger and more inclusive. And now these dialogues are happening all over the world and has become part of the norm of science dialogue now in a quite extraordinary way, when it had been marginalized and really was peripheral. And His Holiness has been in the center of that, in his ability to move from a completely Eastern point of view of exploration in terms of consciousness and mind to a Western idea as well. I'm curious, and we don't have that much more time, but the sticking block between Eastern sciences and Western sciences is, can there be consciousness outside of the brain, outside of material reality? And this always comes to this point with you and scientists where you agree to disagree. But how do you think that we'll ever be able to bridge that distance?
and our sort of contact or discussion with scientists, mainly 4 fields, cosmology. The essential sort of concept already mentioned some Buddhist text. All galaxies come from 5 elements, then dissolve into the space. Come and go, come to go. So it's already mentioned. But more detail, like Big Bang, we can learn from scientists. Then neurobiology, Tibetan medical system, more knowledge about a physical condition. Although in our practice, there's a certain yoga practice, also is mentioned about the different element of the body and the different sort of, channels like that. Then, physics, quantum physics. Quantum physics is concerned, I have keen interest. So I have some discussions with many scientists about quantum physics. Where we discuss one sort of Indian nuclear physicist, now he no longer. He once told me, quantum physics in the West, something new. But in India, over 2,600 years already developed the quantum physics. The concept of quantum physics already there. It is true. So when we discuss with quantum physicists, you see, it seems to see we have better knowledge than the scientist. One thing. Then the psychology. As far as the psychology is concerned, I think Buddhist psychology highly advanced. I usually describe Indian psychology, ancient Indian psychology. Buddha himself, product of ancient Indian tradition. So, Indian psychology, I think more than 3,000 years. So therefore, psychology is concerned, knowledge about mind is concerned, you see, many scientists, you see, they really very, very eager to learn from our knowledge, like that. Then till the late 20th century, it's a scientist, only brain. Beside brain, nothing. Now gradually, because they experiment, some people who really have deeper experience through meditation, then through training mind or meditation, affect their brain.
On the brain,
Oh,
effect on the brain. Particularly on the, explained in terms of neuroplasticity, brain plasticity.
So therefore, now some brain specialists, now they begin to accept there is another factor which affect our brain. So that we call consciousness, like that. So like that. And when they start dialogue with scientists about 40 years ago, I expressed my desire to some my friend, one Westerner who follow Tibetan Buddhism. Then some of them warned me, be careful. Science is killer of religious faith. So therefore, be careful. Then I start with the sort of with the sort of Buddha's teaching. All my followers should not accept my teaching out of faith, but rather thorough investigation and experiment. So therefore, I thought, no problem. Then I start. So now, eventually, I think the scientific knowledge, not much effect, sort of Buddhist knowledge or Buddhist faith. I think the Buddhist tradition, some effect to scientist mind.
Yeah. All right, we're unfortunately being told our time is up. I could do this forever and ever and ever, but His Holiness has given us, I think, almost half an hour of His very precious time, which we thank Him for. There's so much more to talk about. I would ask everyone here to please remember the people inside of Tibet and
Yes.
how
Yes.
difficult their lives are right now.
Yes.
Please think about them. Please see if there's some way that you can help them. The International Campaign for Tibet is a vehicle that you can trust, that will help them inside and outside of Tibet. So please keep those Tibetans in your thoughts and in your hearts. And Your Holiness, thank you so very, very, very much. I know you're about to start your public talk. And
Darwe. Oh,
yeah. It's all one talk to His Holiness. It doesn't matter.
Team kasa.
Good morning, everybody. Does it work? Good morning, everybody. My name is Matteo Mecacci. I'm the president of the International Campaign for Tibet. And here is Jan Andersson, who's the chairman of ICT Europe and a longtime supporter of the Tibetan people. Thank you, Your Holiness. Thank you, Richard. The International Campaign for Tibet, on the occasion of our 30th anniversary, is honored to offer a grant of $50,000 towards the promotion of Your Holiness' core message of the importance of secular ethics, which is a great inspiration and service to humanity. ICT will make... Thank you.
Okay.
ICT will make this grant to the Dalai Lama Institute for Higher Education, which is based in Bangalore, in India. The fund will be specifically allocated towards the Institute's special curriculum on secular ethics, aiming to educate future Tibetan generations in these universal moral values. This offering is in recognition of Your Holiness' lifelong dedication to peace and nonviolence, your consistent efforts to promote secular ethics, the dynamic leadership which you have provided to the Tibetan people, and which is an inspiration to the international community. Your Holiness, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your wisdom and compassion, which are a strong motivational force for all of us in cultivating such an attitude towards a better future for all. The International Campaign for Tibet, Rotterdam, September 16, 2018.
Thank you. Okay. Pujite. Thank you.
My name is Christa Meindersma. As board member of ICT, I very much like to thank His Holiness for being present during this ICT event today. I remember very vividly, 30 years ago, I was in Tibet. And what struck me most about the Tibetans is their commitment to non-violence and their determination to preserve their culture, their language, and their religion. And of course, their unwavering love for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And some of us, individuals from all over the world, met in Tibet, and we became friends. And we were convinced at that time that if enough information about the situation in Tibet reached the outside world, the issue would be resolved peacefully through dialogue, and His Holiness would be able to return home. Now, 30 years later, at the core of ICT's work is really to bring out the facts about the situation in Tibet. So if you feel inspired by this beautiful conversation and by everything you see and hear today, please join this movement, become engaged, become active, and do your part to preserve this beautiful culture, language, religion of Tibet, and environment, of course. With this, I would like to end this ICT event, and it is my great honor and pleasure to invite His Holiness to now give his public talk on why compassion is necessary in our troubled world. Thank you.